Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started and we'll let people join over the next minutes. So I'm your host, Sandi Hokansson, Executive Coach and CEO of Sound Leadership. Today, we're going to have a discussion on the importance of making bold decisions. And we're going to be joined by the incredible Laurie Chamberlain, who I'm going to be introducing to you shortly. It's really important to remind ourselves that there is no comfort in the learning zone, okay, and no learning in the comfort zone. So today, we're going to work on being bold as leaders. It's a very exciting topic. If you're new to the circle and joining us for the very first time, this is a forum for like-minded leaders to inspire and learn from each other. And we're all on this committed to our individual leadership practice and developing our leadership practice. Just a reminder that the circle webinars are recorded. And if time permits, we'll have a Q&A at the end of our call together. You can find previous sessions of the circle on my website and also on my YouTube channel under Sound Leadership. Today's topic is our third session related to COVID and leading through COVID. Our last session was with Frank Ewing, CEO of AML RightSource. And if you haven't had a chance to look at it, please take the time. It's well worth investing a few minutes in that. And again, you can find it on my website. So now I'm very, very pleased to introduce you to Laurie Chamberlain. She's president of Professional Solutions and Staffing at Adecco Group, North America. Laurie's training and early success was in the legal profession. She went on to join special counsel, first as managing director, and worked her way up through various jobs up into the position of president that she holds today. And now she is president over the broader group of professional staffing and solutions for the entire group in North America. She's had an illustrious career. She is engaging, she's vibrant, she's wise. I'm very pleased to call her a friend of mine, and she herself is a bold leader. So I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. So welcome to the circle, Laurie.
Sandi, can you hear me? Excellent. Thank you so much for that introduction. That was so lovely. I was blushing.
Well, that's great. It's good every once in a while.
Indeed.
So we're looking forward to getting started today, and I am very much looking forward to our moving people out of their comfort zone a little bit. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your current leadership role?
So as you mentioned, I'm over the professional recruitment brands and solutions for the Adecco Group in North America, which equates to about 1,700 colleagues and 6 different business units covering everything from accounting and finance to marketing to legal to non-clinical healthcare and supply chain and logistics, and just about anything that's professional that is not IT is under our portfolio of brands.
Okay, great. So a fairly large group of leaders that you're
Yes.
Looking after. So thinking about what you've been going through over the last several weeks since COVID began, what bold decisions have you had to make during COVID? And perhaps on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard were they to make?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. And I think it's, when I was thinking about bold decisions in COVID, I think everything's a bold decision for so many of us because we are in completely uncharted territory. And so you can't compare COVID to a previous recession. You can't compare COVID to flu season. You can't compare it to anything any of us have ever gone through before. And so I think that we've all had to make a lot of bold decisions throughout the COVID crisis that we never thought we'd be called upon to make. And in thinking about some of the decisions I've made, some of them almost seem funny now to say out loud, but at the time they were a serious decision. So for example, the senior leadership team and I were really weighing the pros and cons of whether we should have our workforce work from home. Should we do it in pockets? This is when there were outbreaks in the Northwest, but not as strong in New York yet. And what should we do? And I feel like over the course of a weekend, we really decided pretty quickly, let's just have everybody work from home. We went from thinking we'll have a phased approach and test it out to over several weeks to no, we're going live with this on Monday and it's the right thing to do. And now looking back at that just seems funny that was even something that took up airtime because everybody's been working from home at this point. But in March, that was a bold decision. So I think, Sandi, there on a scale of 1 to 10, I think that we have all been operating at a high level of bold decision making throughout this that has almost normalized it. But in the beginning, I would say that decision felt like a 10. Whereas recently we decided that our entire workforce was going to be able to work from home through the rest of 2020. And that decision felt more like a 2. So it might feel bold, but in the current pandemic, it's really changed the scale of 1 to 10 of what that looks like.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. It's fascinating that the speed at which we're asked to make changes and the gravity of changes that we're making, we're getting better at it. We're getting better at it. We've been having to do it and flex that muscle every day. So that's good. How has the outcome been about shifting to home base for you? How has that worked with some of the bold decisions you've had to make so far?
So I think it's interesting, we're a giant staffing company, and typically you're not in staffing if you're not a people person. So our culture and our workforce, we're social animals, and to work from home has been especially tough on our population that may live alone, maybe in an urban area where they're really, really locked down, whereas some of our colleagues that are in some states that haven't been as heavily impacted can still go to Starbucks. I talked to a colleague this morning that went to the gym last night. I'm like, what? That's insane. So the population is so diverse in how they're feeling about it. And we really had to look at folks from a holistic perspective, not just on their performance metrics and getting through what the new reality looks like of a client visit is now over Microsoft Teams or Skype versus face-to-face, but also mental health we're looking at of how people are feeling, not just from the isolation, but also any anxiety that they might have about loved ones, anxiety they have about their community, anxiety that they might have about finances. So there's been a lot of attention that we're giving to make sure that our workforce feels like that they have purpose every day and that they have connection every day. And that is an ongoing thing that we as a leadership team are working on all the time to make sure people still feel connected to one another and that they feel like what they're doing has purpose and meaning, because we're trying to limit those feelings of isolation.
Connection is so important for all of us. So why do you believe bold decisions? I know you've made many bold decisions throughout your time in leadership roles. And why do you believe bold decisions are important for leaders to make? I mean, obviously through COVID, it was kind of thrust upon leaders, even if they weren't comfortable with it. They were forced to break a few models. But why do you feel that that's a really good muscle for leaderships to develop?
I think that what leaders are paid to do is move the ball. And I think that there's a big difference between management and leadership. And management is managing the business, managing the P&L, potentially managing the people, but leadership is moving the organization forward in a way that it is better than how you found it, or not for lack of trying. And so I think bold decisions are a requirement, frankly, of leadership. And I think a lot of leaders get stuck because they know the answer in their gut, but they're nervous on how people are going to feel about it. They're nervous, is it going to be too much too soon? And so I have a term that I use a lot with my colleagues, and that is, let's be purposely provocative. Because if you are purposely provocative in things that you say, then the bold decision might not even seem as bold because you get to the right answer. But I think it's critical that leaders feel whatever in their gut, say it out loud, because if you say it out loud, then everybody starts to move on how can we get there versus the details of whether something will or won't work, and spending all the brain power on the pros and cons list versus throw the purposely provocative statement out there that you know in your gut is where you should get to. And then you can figure out how you're going to get there, whether it's going to take 2 weeks or whether it's going to take 5 years. By throwing it out there that everybody knows that that's where your brain went, everybody starts to get aligned on how do we move the organization to that place today. And I think when you don't make bold decisions, you have incremental progress on the legacy you've inherited.
Yeah, I love that. The moving the ball and being provocative. And you've somewhat answered or gone into the next question a little bit. And you're talking about that the purpose of the end game of moving the ball is sometimes more important than the process. But I know you do have a process. That you go through to make a decision, and you weigh it up. So tell us a little bit about what your process is before you really, really want to get to that provocative state.
So a couple of things. Number one, I heard the managing partner of the Chicago office of Baker McKenzie had a really good term that I loved, and that is everyone needs their own personal board of directors. And so on your personal board of directors, somebody might help you with family advice, or somebody might help you with financial advice, or somebody might help you with career advice, but you have your own personal board of directors. And then even within segments, do you have a personal board of directors? So for work, I try to make sure that the leaders that I work with every day, that we balance each other out and that we don't get too stuck in groupthink. And it is good to have somebody who is going to be devil's advocate, or who's going to say something that's unpopular. The second thing, beyond my team, who I trust completely, and we all want to get to the right answer, but we might have different ways of getting there, is I am a big advocate for asking the boots on the ground that a decision is going to impact what they think, and survey them. And if they feel psychological safety in being able to express their view, you can really get a broad sense of the population you're serving. But then you can also dig into that data and see, do you have a few loud voices that are actually getting a lot of the airtime, but the masses feel differently? And so just as an example on this work from home for the rest of 2020, we surveyed all of our colleagues, and obviously everybody didn't respond, but we had a huge response rate. And from that, we could see what percentage of our population felt comfortable coming back to the office and in what conditions, and all those kinds of things. So we got everything from people sharing really personal information about their health or their anxiety or their religious views or their political views to the alternative of, I'm super lonely and I want to go back to the office as soon as I can, but I don't think it's safe, and everything in between. So from that, we were able to kind of create a pie chart of where everybody was living. But then I looked at the legislative changes that were happening, the risk, the legal considerations, what our real estate portfolio looked like. And from all of that, my gut was telling me we should stay home for the rest of 2020, but I knew that wouldn't be a popular decision with everyone. So what often seals the deal for me is negative brainstorming of what would happen if I didn't make the bold choice. And when I went into a negative brainstorming of, okay, what if we don't say through the rest of 2020? What if we just say we're going to decide instead of June 1st, we're going to push that out to July 1st? And I thought, gosh, we could be doing this exercise every week, every month, and all of our brain power is going to be behind opening offices or not versus how we're going after market share. And so oftentimes when I do negative brainstorming of what if you don't make the bold decision, what does your universe look like, it really makes it even more crystallized for me.
Oh, God, I love that. I love that term. That's fantastic. You shared a lot of things there. That was a really fantastic segment. So I love the personal board of directors. I talk about that a lot too. And I really think it's a great reminder for everyone on the phone to, think about how often are you going from the ground up? Are you canvassing? Are you servicing? Are you bringing in that intelligence and the people that are these bold decisions are affecting every day? So I really think that was a critical point as well. And finally, that negative brainstorming is so important when you ask a question in reverse. Sometimes you just get, you've missed something, you find out as a leader, I've missed something. It's so important. So that was a really good nuggets in there. So you've given us some suggestions already, but just for leaders that are on here today and for those that will watch this after, what do you have, just a little suggestions for them if they're thinking, okay, I want to take a few more risks, and maybe right now everyone's thinking about how it relates to COVID, but this might not relate to COVID. This just might be you want to be a bolder leader. Maybe through COVID, you're getting a little more comfortable being a little bolder, and now you want to keep doing that and flex that muscle a little bit more. So tell us a couple suggestions for people that want to become a bolder leader. What do you suggest?
So I think one of the things that my first biggest piece of advice, and I have a couple, but the biggest thing that I would say is you've got to be comfortable with imperfection. And I see a lot of leaders that know what they want to do, but they want to map out a perfect plan. And so bold decisions aren't bold when you spend 6 months trying to put together a plan related to that decision so that the decision is perfect. And I see a lot of people do what I call MBA leadership, that they almost exist as if they're writing a paper for getting their MBA. And so in a classroom environment, it totally works. It's perfect. It's got the finances behind it. It's got the risk behind it. It's got the people component. It's got the resources you need. But again, by the time you have that perfect MBA presentation ready, you might have spent 6 months to a year on the perfection of the plan. And now it's no longer a bold decision. People are sick of talking about it. And you've probably had a couple of false starts, and economic conditions have changed that maybe it's not even the right decision anymore. So I think that imperfection is key to bold decision making, because I have often been accused of flying the plane while I'm building it. So the reality is, when you're flying the plane while you're building it, you adjust along the way, but you're still making progress. And so you've made the decision, you've said the purposely provocative thing, and you move forward, and you might have to adjust a little bit, but you're moving forward. And I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make, is that they have a plan, but they need more time. And they have this painting that's never perfect and never ready for sale, because they just want to make a little tweak or a little adjustment, or I need a little bit more time. I need to get with my committee, and I have to have the perfect PowerPoint presentation ready. And I'm not fly by the seat of my pants, which I can get accused of. It's more, I like to put it out there, and I like to start making progress, because when you make the decision and you make progress on it, even if it's not perfect, you're making more progress than the people who are waiting until the plan is perfect. The second piece of that imperfection is that when people have put together a plan that they think is infallible, they get really committed to it. And so now they don't understand why the people won't do it, or why isn't it working? And they stay stuck on it too long because they get frustrated, because they spent all this time and effort creating a perfect plan that is not, it's the MBA plan, but it doesn't actually work in reality. So I think that's one thing, is getting really comfortable with imperfection and learning as you go and tweaking as you go after you've said the purposely provocative thing, and moving the needle day one on getting to the place that you want to go. The second thing I would say is leave your ego at the door. And this is another thing that I think is really hard for leaders. And I see some people feel like they've got imposter syndrome, that if they make a mistake, they're going to be found out, that they're not the leader that everybody thought they were. Or alternatively, people that are so sure that their idea is perfect, that it's everybody else's problem if it's not working, that leave your ego at the door. And my biggest thing is that if you make decisions that are purposely provocative and you make progress on them while you're doing them, and you adjust and you tweak and you look at the data and you look at what people are really doing, and you ask a lot of questions, one thing you can learn is that people misunderstood you. And that's not their fault or your fault. It's just you were so excited about your idea. People didn't interrupt you for questions. You might not have done any role plays about it, and you realize people are going down the road without really understanding what your purposely provocative thing was. And so going back and asking questions of, tell me how you're executing on this, or tell me how you're feeling about this, or what are you seeing people do since the last town hall differently, or do you see an energy, do you see a depression? And be willing to say, people don't get it, and say, okay, instead of like, what do you mean they don't get it? It's the most awesome thing ever. Okay, talk to me about that. They don't get it. That's not good. Where are we missing the boat? Tell me what they do think it is, and let's see where we're missing the gaps. But I think a lot of leaders, their ego is so involved that they either don't want to make a mistake and feel like people think they don't know what they're doing, or they're so convinced their idea is awesome, but it's the execution by the people that is wrong, and they're not willing to ask questions to find out where it went sideways.
Yeah. Wow. So good. All of those points.
I was just going to say, people who know me know that I am the first one to go, oh, sorry about that. Something's not working. So I think that having a sense of humor and being willing to own something that went a little sideways makes everybody else feel relieved, and you get to the real matter of it to get to the right answer.
Yeah, it's the asking for forgiveness versus permission, right? But I think one of the things that really came through to me was just, we're all been asked to make decisions without having all the information. And to your point, you're not ever going to have all the information to make the decisions. Even if you make the MBA plan, you're just not. So better to get the ball rolling, better to get progress being made, and take that leap of faith and trust the people around you. So that's great. You're showing here and giving a lot of confidence to people, because you're very confident in making these bold decisions. But have you always been able to make bold decisions? Tell us a little bit about how you learned to do this and get more comfortable with it.
So I think I have always made decisions that other people find risky. And depending on my status in the organization, or even in my education, it's whether or not my idea got implemented. But I was always willing to throw a crazy idea out, because I think sometimes being brave enough to even say what you're thinking feels intimidating to folks. But saying something, and again, if you leave your ego at the door, I don't care if people think my idea is funny, or they think it's great, or they think it's not going to work in reality. To me, brainstorming is one of my favorite parts of the process. And I like ideas, and I like people throwing ideas out. And I think it can be a challenge for folks, again, going back to that ego, if they feel like if people don't like my idea, they don't think I have value. And I never see it that way. I think the bold ideas are always welcome, even if they're not practical to implement, because it gets you brainstorming and it gets you thinking creatively. And that's one of my favorite things to do with my colleagues and with my family members and with my friends, is to brainstorm the crazy and to laugh. Joyce Russell, a mutual friend of ours, said to me recently that if you have a belly laugh, like a true belly laugh, you burn 35 calories. So now I'm all about saying things that are funny. So we all need to laugh really hard a lot during our workday because it's stressful. And so if people have bold, crazy ideas that gets everybody creatively brainstorming, and that is welcomed instead of a waste of time. And I think that can be a really dangerous thing, that people get into this time management of everything has to be perfect and everything has to follow an agenda and everybody has to come prepared with a presentation. To me, that's tactical decision making, but that's not bold decision making. And I think if you want bold decisions, you have to foster an environment where you not only welcome the crazy, you expect people to throw things out that nobody has said or said before. So we were on a call this morning with the senior leadership team. During this time, we're talking every day for an hour, every morning, to just level set, like, where are we all? Did anything happen in California yesterday? Like, what's going on? And so we're level setting with each other every morning. And this morning, our head of perm, we were talking about a challenge that we were having on a different piece of the business. And he said, I'm just a perm guy, but what about this? And I said, that's a really interesting way to look at it. I've not heard that before. And I don't even know if it's true, but I love that you just said that. So let's think about that. And so he wasn't, instead of just opting out of the conversation, he actually added value to the conversation, because I don't know if his idea will work, frankly. None of us do. But I love that he had the courage to throw it out there, because it got all of us thinking in a different way than the usual suspects coming to the table with something.
Yeah, so true. I loved your little laugh comment. Best thing I've heard in weeks, that this laughter is going to help me lose some weight. That's the best thing ever. But just the idea that, when you're welcoming the crazy and you're being creative and innovative with your teams, you can have some fun too and have some light moments. And, it just shows the different part of your brain that you're tapping into, right? And there's almost a lightness in creativity. Creation is light, right? And you can feel that energy shift. So I think that's important, particularly when we talk about our next question. Our next question are skills that leaders can develop to help them make more bold decisions. And one of them would be to lighten the mood a little bit, I think, is to be able to be more open. What are some other skills? You talked about how you do it and what you do, but what skills are you using when you're doing that?
So I think that there's a number of some are skills and some are what I would call personality traits. And so what I would recommend to everybody is to be authentic and know what role you play as a leader and what are people expecting from you. So if a sense of humor is not what people know or see from you, and you're not necessarily the person that can is comfortable teasing yourself, then don't try to do that, because it's going to come across as really weird and it's going to make people more uncomfortable. But who on your team can provide that levity if that's not your skill set? So part of it is recognizing, how do you need to backfill some of the things that you may not have? So I have somebody who is really, really good at data analytics, and I obviously couldn't be in my job if I didn't look at data. It's important to me, but that's not where my brain immediately goes. My brain goes to, how are we going to gain more clients? How are we going to have an awesome workplace? My brain goes more to a sales mentality or a people mentality, but I've got people around me that go to the finances or go to the details. So for one, I just think, to be a bold leader, you have to authentically know, what do I bring to the table and what do I need to backfill? Because you're not going to be everything to everybody. And it's silly to even try. And it actually makes people more uncomfortable. So that's one thing. Another thing from a skills perspective, and again, I would say these are even personality traits, is that really try to be curious. And Sandi, you know that I was very close to my grandfather. He lived until he was 103, and he was a very accomplished person. He was part of the D-Day invasion. He was an attorney for Standard Oil. He lived a very, very rich life. And yet, for being this hardcore litigator, being hardcore in the Navy, he was always very curious and asked a lot of questions to try and gain a better understanding of people that were people that he considered friends, but also people he considered adversaries. And so he was always trying to find, where's our commonality, where's our common ground, where do we agree, where do we disagree, and why do we disagree? And I think that in leadership, sometimes, again, that pesky ego can get in the way, where you feel like I'm in charge and it's because I said so. and really, by being curious about the resistance you might see, one of my favorite things to do is to call on the person that has the expression that is the most anti what I'm saying. And instead of getting mad at that person, say, I can tell you're not on board. So talk to me about why you're not on board. And the person may say, you know what, it's been too much change for this category of person. And I think if we adjusted it like this, but I think if you come at people that disagree with you, you don't get some really good meaty information. And the person might have been agreeing with 90% of what you were saying. They were just nervous about the execution, or they were not agreeing with anything you were saying, and there was a legitimate reason you needed to hear about it. But I think being curious is something that that is really, really critical in leadership, instead of people either brown-nosing you or not telling you the truth. And so I think that you got to be careful on that. That, are you regularly checking in? Do you get a dose of truth serum? One thing that we did during this pandemic is we have every other week I do a town hall, and I do it live so that everybody can see my expression and everybody can see me behind the town hall. And before the town hall, we ask, what do you want to know? What do you want Laurie to address on the town hall? So I always have an agenda of, here's what I'm going to share about wins or things that are happening or shout outs or whatever. But then at the end, we always do frequently asked questions. And at the last one, it was, people are fatigued from staying at home, and people have different levels of grumpiness or happiness. And up until now, many of the questions have had kind of a positive or curious flavor, whereas some of these questions really came with an edge to them. And so I had a bunch of emoticons that were pondering or angry or whatever, as to add a little levity and add some humor of, whoa, your questions this time, not all of you are happy out there. So let's tackle the hard ones first, because I don't want you to think that I'm hiding from your hard questions. And I think that not being angry that people ask me hard questions, and being willing to talk about the hard questions and the mood behind some of those hard questions is critical as a leader. And if you're willing to address those things, whether people like or dislike what you had to say, they at least respect your level of candor and where you're coming from. And I think that that's really, really critical with, especially during COVID, people are dying for information. Even if they don't like the information, they just want to know. And the level of conspiracy theories and everything else going on in companies right now of, are we going to sell off all our real estate? Are we going to fire people? Are we going to hire people? Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? Are we going to change this? Are we going to whatever? I mean, the questions are fast and furious. And I think by tackling the tough ones head on, that I know they're tough, and I know that people are frustrated. And so I'm going to do the best I can to explain where we are and what we're doing. And also addressing the folks that are your fans and acknowledging, there's a lot of you out there that love what we're doing, and thank you for that. Some of you are not on board, and I need to speak to you as well, and so that you're not leaving anybody behind. But I think being curious about how people feel is critical. It doesn't mean you have to change your path. It just means to understand where everybody is with you on that path.
That's good. That's good. You've given us some really good tactical things to remind people about skills. You talked about knowing what you bring to the table, surrounding yourself with people that balance you out, being curious, and not hiding from the hard questions. So that's great. I think what we're going to do now is I've got one other wrap-up question for us that I want to ask Laurie before we wrap up. We're kind of getting near the end of our session. We're just going to open it up briefly for Q&A and just see if there's someone else besides me that has another question for Laurie before we wrap up. Give it a minute here. You can just unmute your line.
So Sandi, will you see it in a chat or will they ask out loud?
They will ask out loud.
Okay.
Give them a second. Anyone out there? You can raise your hand as well.
Hey Sandi, it's Brad. How are you doing today?
Good, Brad. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Laurie, thank you so much. It's been excellent listening to you. A question for you. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase it, but I think you'll get what I understand. You talked a lot about being bold, and could you speak a little bit as a woman? Do you find that is more difficult, or have you found that more difficult within your career, or what's the advice you would give to up-and-coming female leaders in order to feel confident to share those voices?
So it's funny that you asked that, because I have such a mixed reaction to my femaleness. And not that I don't love being a female, I do, but I think that I think that everybody has the opportunity to be bold, regardless of gender or anything else. It's are you brave? Are you brave enough to say what you're thinking? And when I say brave, it means that you don't say it with an apology in your voice. You don't say it with an emotion in your voice of maybe passion, but not that if you don't like this idea, it's somehow like not liking my firstborn child. And I think that where I see people, men and women, go sideways is that they become so wedded to their idea of reflection of who they are as a person and their value as a person, and whether they're respected or whether people like their decision. And so it's not so much the idea, it's the presentation of the idea. And if you believe in your idea and you share it with the conviction of sharing an idea, and people don't like it, at least you put it out there that you have this idea. And I think that that's where people have way too much going on in their head about whether they're going to say something or not. And so by the time they've said it, maybe somebody else has said it, or they're so emotional about it because of all the time that has been spent going down the wrong path because they were afraid to say something that could have made a difference earlier on. So I don't think from a decision-making perspective, I think most women I know are phenomenal decision makers, but they get in their own way of whether they're actually brave enough to share what they're thinking.
That's great. Thank you so much, Laurie. I always learn something new during that conversation, because you're exactly right. It's loaded with many different things. And I think it's not just women, but it's anything related to any diversity or really any one person. So that's great advice. Thank you.
Yeah, I just think be brave. Just as a quick little anecdote, my daughter has gone to the same camp since she was 8 years old. She's 15 this year and was supposed to be a counselor in training, but we're not sure if she's going to camp at all this summer. But anyway, I asked her what she loves so much about this camp, because she literally sleeps in a tent for 6 weeks. She has a bucket and has to go up a hill to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night with a flashlight. If you knew my daughter, this is not a place you would think that she would love. And she said, you know what, at camp, there's not peer pressure. And she said, actually, there is peer pressure. It's just different than peer pressure at school. Peer pressure at camp is people pressure you to be your best, whereas peer pressure at school might be a competitive peer pressure or a who's getting ahead. And she said that at camp, it's peer pressure to be your best. And if people know that you're good at something, they won't let you not do it. And I love that concept from a leadership perspective of, do you drive all your people to be their best? And do you pressure them into being vocal about their good ideas or pressure them into being their best? Or do they feel like there's a competitive environment of being that kind of peer pressure? So I just love that analogy. It was such an interesting thing for my child to say, but it really resonates with me in leadership too, that there are some leaders who expect the best, who expect perfection, who expect everybody to be running all gears all the time. And there are other people who get the best performance out of folks. And I was really fortunate that I worked with leaders that really encouraged me to be my best. And so it continued to help me be brave along the way.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Brad. And thank you, Laurie, for that. So we'll just wrap up with one question because we're trying to wrap up on time, and then we'll move into the reflection portion of our call. So what do you think is next for leaders regarding bold decisions? I mean, the economy's opening up now and we're moving forward. So what do you think is next?
I think the thing that people need to think about is what has this crisis done? And I know that seems trite because, of course, there's all kinds of news commentators talking about that. There's sociologists talking about that. But for organizations, I think that it's a real opportunity to look at how can we move the needle related to technology? How can we be a different kind of workforce for the future? And if you look at over time, there's always something that creates the next period of prosperity. So the Industrial Revolution, or I mean, you can go back in time a gazillion different times and places. I think COVID is actually going to create a giant time of prosperity in a different way, and that prosperity is balance. And I think that people are really assessing right now, what balance should I have in my life? I have traveled every week for the last 20 years, and in the last 3 months, I've barely left my home office, but I've eaten dinner with my family every night, and I'm eager to get back on the road and see colleagues and travel again. But I think I will have more balance. And really, do I need to be in person for that meeting, or could it be over Microsoft Teams? Also, there are a lot of organizations right now that people are just wondering, how much do I materially need? I was on a Zoom family reunion with aunts and uncles and cousins that I haven't seen in a really long time, because we've all got time to do those things. And we were talking about what's changing for you. And my aunt said, I have so many clothes. Why do I have so many clothes? And she was laughing because she's wearing the same thing every day. And she said, even when I go back to the office, do I need so many clothes? And so I think there's going to be a lot more about where do we spend our time? Where do we spend our money? And organizations and the population of our communities are really going to care about sustainability. They're going to care about value systems. That this pandemic has created an opportunity for everybody to think, do we need to be so busy all the time? Do we need to be running in 100 directions all the time? That doesn't mean that people are going to get less competitive or not want to be successful, but I think how people are going to define success is going to be very different. And we as leaders have to figure out, what does that look like for our workforce and for ourselves as leaders and for our communities in what we do.
Wow, that's a great place to end it. We could talk all day about this and being bold together. So with everyone here on the phone, I hope everyone has enjoyed this as much as I have today, Laurie. It's been a wealth of knowledge and lots of great examples and lots of great passion and energy on being bold and being brave. And thank you so much for joining the circle and for your time today.
Thank you so much, Sandi, for having me. It was really fun, and it was a nice respite from some of the other things that I'm doing. So thank you.
Good, great. Always great to have you. Come back next year. We'd love to have you again.
Absolutely.
Hey guys, just before we wrap up, I just want to leave you with some things to think about as you're thinking about making decisions in uncertain times, and maybe and some of the things and reflecting on the things that Laurie talked about today and we've shared together. You know, what's your greatest fear? What's holding you back? It's always a great place to start, and really when you reflect. And what will you regret 5 years from now if you don't make that decision now or don't make that change today? And remember, you know, we're not here to just be comfortable, you know. Don't make comfort your goal of your entire leadership journey or your leadership practice. The fun and the learning really begins when we welcome the crazy, as Laurie said today. So I'll leave that with you. I hope you have a chance to reflect on that. Just remember our last Thrive, Lead, Succeed webinar before the summer break is June 24th. We're going to have another really inspiring speaker, Shannon Cohen, and we're going to speak about leadership wellness. So maybe a little bit talking about that balance that Laurie ended on, and making sure that we're staying well and not just well through COVID, but just well as a whole as leaders. So don't miss that. It was great having you all with us, and thank you so much today for joining the circle. Take good care, everyone. Lead well. Bye-bye.